Good morning, everybody. It's a great honor and pleasure to be with you. It's my first time in Cyprus, and I'll disclose my age in a minute. And it is a big pleasure to be in this forum then, while I'm the first time in Cyprus. I'll try to respond in 10 minutes to this big question: can we prosper and sustain the planet? And responding to three big questions. And I'll do some data entertainment with you the next 10 minutes. And so I hope you get something out for your country and for the world. There's three big questions that I'd like to respond to you. And the first is, before we talk about sustainability and prosperity, we should talk about ourselves. And the question I'm sure you ask yourself, maybe not every day, but every week or every month: how long will I live? It's a question that depends on many variables. Sorry, it depends on luck. But there is a mathematical approach to that. And we at World Data Lab actually create those, what we call data machines, that you can find out. And this is available to you. You can check it out. It's Population.io. It's a TED Talk that I did a few years ago to launch this machinery. And you put your birthday. Mine is actually on January 20, 1971. So I'll turn 54 the day the next American president will be inaugurated. And I have to live another 31.5 years as a German. So it's April 25, 2055 is the statistical estimate. It's actually a Sunday. But if I want to experience another summer, I should actually move to Cyprus, because in Cyprus I can live another half year longer. So all of you here in the room who are age 52, stay here, because you live longer than in other parts of Europe. The best country for us, age 52 men, is actually Australia or Switzerland. So try it out. For women, by the way, it's a different country. It's actually Japan. So it's a way to think about your life and how long you live and what you want to do with your life. The more serious and policy perspective on what I showed you is to think about the people who die every year. And eventually we have to die, but we want to die old and not young. And I define old now, everybody above 65 years. So we should at least live till retirement before we die and before our loved ones die. What are the numbers for this year? How many people will die this year? Actually, the answer is, in the world, 68 million. And 40 million, that's the good news if you want to say so, die old, but 28 million among us, and I'll show you the countries in a minute, die young. And if we were to redefine the Sustainable Development Goals, to which Cyprus subscribed to, we should try to get that 28 million number to zero, including in Cyprus. So where are these people dying? Most people, obviously, as you expect, die in Asia, because that's where most people live. Even most young people die in Asia, 14 million. Every second person who dies young dies in Asia. What about Americas? Very similar to Asia, roughly 60-40 split. What about Europe? That's where we all live. That's the good news. For every person who dies young, 7.5 die old. But still, 1 million Europeans will die this year young in this broad definition. What about Africa? It's the opposite. We just heard about migration, the opposite challenge. Why want Africans often come and migrate to Europe? Well, they live longer and prosper here more. So in Africa, it's the opposite as in Europe. For every person that dies old, 4 people die young. What about Cyprus? Cyprus is actually similar to Europe. I'm not sure if you have the number on your head, but there's roughly 9,000 people who will die in Cyprus this year. That's the estimate, 9,000. And still, like the European average, 1,500 die young. Heart-related issues, cancer-related accidents. So as a Cyprus policymaker, try to get, next time we meet, that number down, the 1,500. The top number you can't get down, because eventually we have to die, but it should be lower. Now let's come to the core question. How much money do we have? How much money is there in the world? How much money is in Europe? How much money is in Cyprus? And who generates the thriving economy, the contribution? So one way to think about this is the core force of economic development, which is actually the middle class. And what we have done is to organize the world in a simple way to think about everybody in the world. How many people are we? We actually at this interesting moment of 8 billion people. The first time ever, all of us have experienced a world of 8 billion. How wealthy or poor are those people? 600 million are very poor, considered extreme poor by the UN or the World Bank definition. How many are vulnerable? This is the second block. That's similar to what you consider poor in a European sense. 3.4 billion. How many are middle class? You may be surprised, because we talk in Europe about a shrinking middle class, wrongly. It's the biggest block, 3.75 billion. And the rich people are important, some of them in this room, 250 billion. Let's check the numbers again. Please add them up. How much is 600 plus 3.4? How much is that? 4 billion. So we are in this very unique moment that half the world is rich and middle class, and half the world is poor and vulnerable. So 8 billion, 4 billion on the left side, 4 billion on the right side. It's the best world we have ever been at. We still want to create a better world, make sure the right side grows faster. How fast is the right side growing? It should go very fast. 3 people per second. Every second, a person enters the middle, 3 people enter the middle class, and you see the ticking. Where are they? They are not the destinations of Cyprus tourists. They are in Bangladesh, in China, in Malaysia, in India. They're young, they're old, they're everywhere, but not much in Europe, because Europe does not have demographic momentum, as we just discussed, and Europeans are already in the middle class, and they may spend more on a hotel in Cyprus next time, but there'll not be more Europeans coming to Cyprus, except you gain market share from Greece or Spain. So that's that middle class dynamism, the trend line that we always forget when we look at the headlines. World Data Lab will launch its next World Consumer Outlook on Thursday. You're lucky you get the headlines today, as how many new consumers will there be next year? And there will be more, again, despite what we see in the headlines, despite Ukraine, despite Israel, there'll be more consumers next year. Where are they? They are 80% in Asia, and for the first time in a row, it is not China that will add most. It will be India. China, as you see here, is actually being downgraded by 1 million person less. India is upgraded by 2 million more, so India will have 34 million, so like 30 times Cyprus in the consumer class next year. Africa is coming as well. Africa will have more extra than Europe or Latin America, but starting from a slow base. So China and India dominates. If you subtract from China and India, who comes next? What is the number 3 in the world? The number 3 is actually Indonesia. 4 million next year, 5 million next year. And then you see the green countries are the Asian countries. We have Egypt as a neighbor to Cyprus, and Nigeria as an African country, Brazil and Mexico. Those are all the countries that add more than 1 million consumers. Potential tourists in Cyprus, potential consumers of agriculture products, of clothing, of bicycles, of motorcycles. These are your new target audiences. Turkey being there as the last in the row, also of adding 1 million consumers. So we have 10 countries here, and then you have India and China as the big one. So now you may ask yourself, we live longer, there's more money in the world, especially in Asia. Can we sustain the planet? Can we prosper and manage climate change? And again, you may be surprised, there is a glimmer of hope, and Cyprus has a role there. So this is the third machine we built, which is a world emissions clock. We launched it in COP27, and it counts the emissions that we consume every second. It's a complex topic, a lot of scientists there, but we can simplify. 2,000 tons per second. So every time we breathe, 2,000 tons. The tons, where do they come from? A lot from China, a lot from the US, a lot from electricity/energy, industry, agriculture. You can see it here in the animation, and the machinery has much more detailed. So, but what the big message that we have been receiving, and rightly so, was we are at fault. We Europeans, we rich people have created the problem, which may be correct, but unfortunately we can't be the solution anymore alone, because we are not the main cause of emissions today. And what we have done here, which I did this with the World Bank chief economist, is to do something very simple, to think of countries that are poor, middle class, and rich. That's what institutions like the World Bank, like the EU, think about and work globally, helping make countries rich. But what nobody has done yet is to think of clean countries, say low-emission countries, middle-emission countries, and dirty countries. And if you map all the countries, here's a surprise. Only 80 plus countries, 87 countries are where you expect them. Poor and clean, middle, rich and dirty. That's like a little less than half the world. The rest of the half of the world is somewhere else. So you get everything. Until last year, there was even one dirty, rich, poor country. That was Zambia. You have 3 clean and rich countries. That's where you want to be as Cyprus, top right. And I'll get you an insight there in a minute. The big challenge in the world is the dark red block. 20 countries which are middle income, not rich, middle income and dirty, quote unquote. China being among them, but it includes Kazakhstan, Mongolia, some surprises in these 20 countries. They cause most of the emissions, 23 gigatons. 23 gigatons out of 58, that's roughly 40% that they consume. So that's this little matrix that you can play with and look at. So now I want to show you where Cyprus lies. Cyprus lies in a good spot, but not in a great spot. The great spot is your neighbor and soulmate, if I may say so, Malta. Malta is one of the only 3 countries that are rich and clean. The other 2 is Romania and Chile. Greece and Cyprus is in that block that you say you're rich, but you should try to move up, and I'll tell you how you can do this in a second. Here, basically, I forgot to mention, how do you classify low, medium, high? We do 5 tons per capita and 10 tons. So think of yourself as a person that pollutes, like we all do, and the number for you is 7.5 tons as a world citizen. And I'll tell you that the number for Cyprus is actually a bit better. So Cyprus is better than the world average. So you may have been surprised by that. So here's the concluding thought. Cyprus is 7.2 tons. Malta is a little better. You see why it's better, mostly because of energy, but for a few other factors too. And the aim is to go to a lower number. How do you get to a lower number? Is let's just do what Malta did in energy. Don't come completely clean. Don't do everything you could do, but if you just did what Malta did, you're very close to become the 4th country that is clean and rich. But if you do complete transformation of energy with solar and wind, then Cyprus would below be 5 tons per capita, which is, again, one of the few countries in the world that are clean and rich, and it is somehow doable for your country. So here's a final, even bigger sense of optimism and hope, and that includes the UK that we have prominently covered here today. Remember this number, 7.5 tons is the average that a world person pollutes. 58 gigatons divided by 8 billion people. Gigatons is like billion, so 58 divided by 8 gives you 7.5. What is the worst in the G20? It is not the US, it's actually Saudi Arabia. The US, surprisingly, is only the 4th worst, but still pretty bad. Canada and Australia are worse than the US. The US is 18 tons. Remember where Cyprus was, and I'll show you again. Where's the EU? The EU is surprisingly good, actually. It is only at 8 tons, and it's not because of my home country, which is a problem. Germany is at 10 tons, but the EU is actually at 8 tons. Cyprus is better than the EU at 7 tons, and Malta is even better. It's the best in the EU at 5 tons. Can we be even better? Can we be better? Yes, if we combine the best of everything. You see the big sectors that are polluting? That's everything: agriculture, buildings, energy, industry, transport. Who is the best? Who is the best in the rich world? It's actually Swedish buildings, Swiss electricity, British industry, or whatever is still left of British industry, Dutch transport. By the way, not that great. Transport is the challenge here, interestingly, but they are still the best in the EU and the world. And South Korea, agriculture / reforestation and land use. So they do a lot of reforestation. Check out this number. Remember where Cyprus was. Cyprus is good but not great, 3.1. Remember where Malta was, 4.9. The best in the world combination is 3 tons. If these countries keep their promises, where will they be in 2030? They'll be at 2.2 tons. It's a fundamentally different and better and cleaner world. Remember what the US was at 18 tons. And most people here in this room would prefer to live in these countries compared to the US. 2.2 tons, what does this mean? It means better than we promised in Paris. In Paris, we promised 3.6 tons under the 1.5 degree trajectory in 2015. So we can be clean and rich. I think we can prosper and fight climate change. We should not choose between prosperity and sustainability. We are strong enough, and Cyprus is strong enough to do both. And we can do it, John, with good data. Thank you very much.